In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, we put our trust in God. We return to Him, and we hope we can then return to ourselves and to humanity. So, what I'm going to share is some reflections on identity, but in connection with unity. Maybe some people think this is, somehow contradictory, because identity is to help you to understand yourself, separate from others, and to have a specific, particular, understanding of yourself.
Bill? Isabel? Is Bill translating? Piero doesn't hear.
At this moment disappeared. But okay.
Okay.
The microphone is yes. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Unity.
Yes. Yeah, so some people may think that notion of identity and notion of unity contradict each other, because identity is to be able to single out yourself. For example, your identity is even different from your siblings. Yeah, you have your own identity. Every person has his own identity or her own identity, and therefore, when we say, identity card, it's just you, not your father or mother or siblings. This has been very much shaping our mind to the extent that even when we come to religion, when we come to God, we bring the most specific part first. So I am so and so, that also is a Muslim, or is a Shia, or is an Iranian. And then with the general characteristics also, it's very delicate how you prioritize. Are you first Iranian, for example, and Muslim, or you are first Muslim and Iranian, or Shia or Catholic, So we don't have very kind of universal way of how to look at your identity. So what I'm going to share is what I think is a correct way of identifying ourselves, which is more loyal to being a faithful person. Our identity, of course, is very much shaped by our family life, by our parents and grandparents. And this is why in all our traditions, family roots are very important. And although we believe that a child born into a family does not necessarily follow the same line, so sometimes a good child comes from bad family, or bad child from good family, but still, whether you like it or not, your parents and foreparents are very important in your formation and your identity. Or when it comes to knowledge and spirituality in Islamic tradition, maybe in Christianity is also the same, your teachers are very important. Sometimes I say to my students that in Islamic traditional way of education, we never judge people just based on what they know or what they answer to the questions or a certificate. If I don't know someone's teacher, it's like someone whose father is not known. Because your teacher is part of your identity. And who was the teacher of the? Because the line is very important. It's like a branch of a tree. If you don't know to which tree you belong, and you all of a sudden in vacuum have produced some leaves, this is not acceptable as a tree. So belonging to the tree is very important. The Quran has the notion of tree. And this notion is very important for good things and bad things. We have shajara tayyibah, we have shajara khabithah. Good tree and bad tree. Because good things spread through network, bad things also through network. Separate good, separate bad are not that effective. So God says, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا كَلِمَةً طَيِّبَةً كَالشَّجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ أصلها في السماء أصلها في الأرض أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء. So the example of a pleasant word is a very important notion. Word doesn't mean just like we say Jesus was a word. So word can stand for truth, for reality, or we say word of God, word of unity. So the example of it is like a blessed tree that has roots very deep and firm, but the branches are in the sky. تؤتي أكلها كل حين بإذن ربها. Every now and then it bears its fruits with the blessing of its Lord. So everything which is beneficial, which is fruitful, which is producing positive energy, positive impact, should be like a tree, which has roots, deeply rooted in realities, but also is appearing outside. So there are leaves and branches outside and bears fruits. So for knowledge, it's very important to belong to a tree. For spirituality also is very important. In Sufi orders or in other forms of spirituality in Islam, teachers are very important. For example, one of the most important, influential spirituality paths that we have in the Shia world today is starting from a particular person of about maybe 2 centuries ago that was passed on to some scholars in Najaf, and then it reached, for example, Ayatollah Qadi Tabatabai, who was spiritual teacher of many of great authorities. And this line has affected almost the spirituality of every Shia, although maybe people even don't know them, because most of our great authorities are trained by this line in spirituality. So your identity as a religious scholar or a spiritual person is partly shaped by your belonging to a river or to a tree. And much can be said about this. And this is different from modern understanding that every person is encouraged that you can be alone and you can establish yourself by being original. And original means not to belong to any origin. So if you have an origin, they say you are not original. You must be origin. Original is the one who is root for himself and root of his ideas. But for us, original is when you are able to show that this new thing goes back to the origins. We don't want just to repeat. A tree has always to grow new leaves and new branches, yeah? But must be connected to the roots. So we don't say to be original means to be disconnected and to start something from scratch. So this is very important. Another aspect which is very important is connection with the community. We are not able to understand ourselves without knowing to which community we belong and which leader we follow. So each of these has, of course, lots of discussions, but from especially a Shia perspective, but maybe other Muslims can agree, but from Shia perspective, your belonging to a congregation who has an imam is very important part of your understanding of yourself. Like, for example, if I am a member of a congregation for prayer or worship, yeah, I should know which congregation, means who are other people and who is the leader. Yeah, I cannot understand myself as a member of congregation without knowing the rest of congregation and the leader of the congregation. Yeah, some people maybe say, no, I am going to this building, to this mosque or this church. But mosque and church are not buildings. Buildings are not important. The congregation is giving meaning to the building. Yeah, even if I go to the same building alone, it's not working. I'm not saying the building is not to be respected, but I'm saying that the main thing is not the building. Building serves the congregation. And congregation definitely needs a leader. Without a leader, congregation is not complete. It's like body without head. So, therefore, very important part of our understanding of our identity is who is my leader? And we have hadith from Sunni, Shia, all have mentioned this hadith that Man mata wa lam ya'rif imama zamanihi mata mitat al-jahiliyyah. Whoever dies without knowing imam of his time, he dies like those who died in the time of ignorance. Before Islam, we call it the age of ignorance. So it's very important for us to always connect to the living imam for us. So we have to connect. So our living imam is the Imam Mahdi who comes with Jesus. So if I know all previous imams and I don't connect to the living imam, my identity is not complete. Like, for example, if you go to a church or mosque, you know previous priests or imams, but you don't know the current one. So it means that you have not become part of it. Or you say, this person who is in this place is my teacher, but I don't know him. How can he be your teacher? Because leader, first of all, is a teacher and guide. Leader is not mainly or just a political leadership. This is comprehensive and it starts with spirituality and teaching and knowledge, etc. Sometimes we had, or most of the time, our imams didn't have any political role. Yeah, so leader doesn't mean necessarily to have political role. It depends on the situation. So, which congregation I belong to and who is my leader are very important part of our understanding of our identity. Therefore, the Quran says, on the day of judgment, يَوْمَ نَدْعُ كُلَّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ. God will ask all peoples to join their leaders. Good leaders or bad leaders. So, on the day of judgment, according to Quran, we are all first resurrected individually. I am resurrected individually. You are resurrected individually. Quran says, "Kullun atihi yawm al-qiyamati farda." Everyone comes as individuals, but then we will be assembled, and we will be assembled based on the leaders we have been following. So, for example, those who were following Moses or Jesus, or those who were following, Pharaoh or, opposite leaders, on the day of judgment, they will be asked to stand behind the people that they followed in this world. Therefore, when they go to heaven or hell, they don't go as individuals. They are resurrected as individuals. They will be assembled. But then the Quran says, سِيقَ الَّذِينَ تَقَوْا رَبَّهُمْ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ زُمَرًا. Those who are pious, they will be led towards heaven in groups. So people as groups, as communities go to heaven, not as individuals. So this shows that our identity is mostly shaped by belonging to a community and having a specific leader. Those who had not belonged to any community or any leader, maybe they will be at the end, like people who have lost their passports and identity cards. So then they say, okay, we will see which group you resemble the most. You didn't officially belong to any group, but we will see which groups you resemble the most. So they need DNA testing. So part of our identity is belonging to the congregation, to the community, and to the leadership. But the main aspect of our identity, which is lying all this, is our belonging to God. But this is a part of identity that unfortunately some people don't associate themselves with. Now, imagine if I don't know my family background. Yeah? Maybe I was separated from my family when I was born. I don't know who were my parents. I was brought up in an orphanage, for example, or a place, Or maybe I lost my memory. I don't know who were my parents. Which country do I belong, So when it comes to God, unfortunately, some people have similar experience like a child separated from parents. So some people don't know that they come from God. And they don't associate themselves with God, while this is the most important aspect of our identity. And therefore, the Quran says, if you forget God, you forget yourself. What does it mean? It means that there is no way to know yourself without knowing God. So God is the central part of your identity. The Quran says, لا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. Do not be like the people who forgot God. Then God made them forget themselves. So it means that if you forget God, you don't have even proper understanding of yourself. Many people, unfortunately, in the world, because they don't know they come from God, they don't appreciate even themselves. They think, imagine if you think you are just born into this world by accident or by explosion, or by a blind process of evolution. So you are like a misplaced person. You don't know to which world you belong, If someone doesn't know parents, for example, so it's very difficult for them to associate themselves, with the people around. You don't know where you were born, which language you had. You forgot everything. So you will be very confused. Without God, we cannot know ourselves and our position. Imagine if, for example, there is a pilot in the sky and loses connection with the control tower. What can they do, in the sky without any direction, any signal, any connection, or a radio without connection to the service, which is just a physical object. It's not, or a mobile that has no connection. So we belong to God in a very profound way. If I say this pen belongs to me, this is not very profound because this can exist without me and can function without me. Yeah? Someone else can take this pen and write. But we belong to God in much more fundamental way. We belong to God in the way that we cannot even know what we are without God. Yeah? We totally become a different thing if we disconnect ourselves from God. So we become from something very valuable to something which is useless without connection with God. So in Islamic spirituality, there is great emphasis on knowing our understand on ourselves in this way, as a person who belongs to God. And here, then we have the concept of servant of God. You say Abdullah. And I said to Benny last night that it was very interesting that the Pope referred to Chiara as servant of God, and he said that this is part of the official procedure for becoming a saint. So I said this title of servant of God is very, very important for us. And you know, we say our prophet was a servant of God and a messenger. In every prayer, we say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. He was a servant of God. And sometimes I reflect on this, I say, the greatest achievement of the prophet was that he was a servant of God. And then to be a messenger, it was a task. You don't become messenger as your achievement. God gives you the task. But his achievement was to be a servant of God. When Jesus was born, according to the Quran, God asked Lady Mary that don't talk to the people who ask where this child has come from. Okay? And tell them, I have fasted, so I don't speak. Okay? قُلْ إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. I don't speak to any human being. But she pointed at the baby, Jesus. The very first thing that Jesus said according to this verse, of course, this doesn't say he didn't say anything else, but the very first thing that it is mentioned here is that he said, قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. I am servant of God. So this is very important because for our prophet, after even 63 years of life, we say he was a servant of God. So there is nothing higher than this. And Jesus also says, I am a servant of God. So he doesn't say, I am Jesus, the son of Mary. Although many times the Quran refers to him as Jesus, son of Mary. And sometimes God just says, son of Mary. Because Mary was very important part of identity of Jesus. Every child that, father, mother are very important. But for Jesus, mother was especially important because he had no human father. Yeah, so we take our identity partly from father, partly from mother, grandfather. But Mary is very important for Jesus more than other mothers for different reasons. Therefore, sometimes God says in the Quran, son of Mary. Sometimes says Jesus, Isa ibn Maryam. Okay, this is the way God talks about Jesus. But how Jesus talks about himself. This is amazing. When he talks about himself, he doesn't say, I am Jesus, or I am son of Mary. He says, I am servant of God. So this is a great lesson for us, that we should have this understanding of ourselves that more than being son of this father or son of this mother, or being a man or woman, being from this part of the world or that part of the world, the first thing that we should associate ourselves with and identify ourselves with is that we belong to God. Inni Abdullah. sometimes I use this example. I say, if it happens that you meet the assistant of the king, for example, the advisor, personal assistant, driver, if you ask them who you are, what would be the answer? If he is really proud of being a helper of the king, he would not say his name. If you say who you are, he says, I am the assistant or driver or the cook of the king. He would not say, because he knows that it's not important, what is his name, it can be any name. For him, the most important thing that he is close to the king. So if someone asks me who you are, if I want to answer in a very deep intellectual way, not in a formal official way, I should not say I am Muhammad Ali Shomali, son of my father and mother. I should say I am servant of God, servant of the king. This should be my understanding of myself. And then it will automatically have implications. I cannot say I'm servant of God and do mischief or selfish things or plan for myself. I have to then do everything as a servant of God is expected to do. So I have to act in a godly manner and reflect light of God to others. So without this kind of understanding of our identity, we cannot really understand ourselves. Many people come to this world and maybe die without understanding who they are, because they have not been able to have this active and conscious connection with God. There is a story that, I think it's very meaningful. There was a time that there was a slavery. So they used to have markets for selling and buying slaves. So they say one person wanted to buy a slave and was looking around and found a person and said, let me test, is this going to be a good one or not? He said, what is your name? And the servant said, whatever you call me. He said, what do you eat? Because he wanted to see if he eats a special food, might be not easy. He said, whatever you feed me. How many hours you sleep? Because if he's lazy and sleeps too much, I said, then that's not useful. He said, as much as you allow me. Anything he asked, he said, as you wish. So he said, this is the best one. So we need to be like this with God. We shouldn't, have lots of preconditions for God, I will be your servant, but you have to give me this and this and this and this, otherwise, don't expect me to be a good servant. So we should say, I am going to be your servant, whether I am healthy or ill, whether I am rich or poor, whether I am known or unknown. I want to be your servant. And I know that after all, this is the best for me. Even for me and for everyone else, the best is if I leave aside my personal choices and preferences and just serve you. Because no one with serving God is going to, lose. Yeah? Our problem is that we think we know what is better for us than God. So we want to say to God, I want this, I want this, I want this. But we should leave these things, it is a childish. If you are working with someone who is the kindest person and the most generous, the most forgiving person, the most wisest person, then why you say what you need? It doesn't make sense. He knows the best for you. Maybe he finds rich is better for you or poverty. Health is better or illness. Don't put things to him. He will know the best. So, to be a servant of God is very important part of our identity, and we believe that all the prophets and messengers had this understanding of themselves. And this is why they were called Muslim. Muslim not in the sense they followed Prophet Muhammad or Quran. No, even Prophet Muhammad was called Muslim for the same reason that they were called Muslims, because they found that the best thing to do is to submit yourself to God and be a servant of God. If Abraham was proud of anything, he was proud for trying to be submissive to God. Jacob, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, disciples of Jesus, all were trying to be servants of God. So we need to have this kind of understanding. And if you have this kind of understanding, then you bring lots of light to this world. A mirror, if forgets that it's a mirror and thinks that it's the source of light by itself, then cannot help, because then would turn away from the sun and wants to give light. Cannot do that. Yes, can give a little percentage because already sun is shining, but if you forget you are a mirror, you become useless or near useless. But if you are mindful that you are just a mirror, or even more than mirror, you are a shadow of God, then you can bring lots of light to yourself and to people. And I very much liked what Piero said in the morning, that we need to purify ourselves and we need to do this as a work of God for the glory of God, because this is the only way to be understanding ourselves and to be at maximum productivity, if you want to be at maximum productivity. Now, how can I be servant of God? This is a second question. Sometimes in our discussions, I have said here in the same place in Sophia, and then in other places I repeated, that the most important thing is to be submissive to God. And then sometimes I have said 99% is this. 1% is how to do it. So we as Muslims and Christians and Jews, unfortunately, many times, discuss a lot and debate about how we pray, how we, do this or that. But these are expressions of a deeper thing, and that is whether we want to be serving God or not. If a Christian is dedicating his or her life to God and is not praying like me or worshiping like me, this is, I think, less important than a Muslim who does everything like me but is not in heart submissive to God. Yeah? So if you have a Muslim and Christian who try to submit themselves to God and serve God, this is, I think, 99%. The rest is how you do it. Of course, such people, if they have really dedicated themselves to God, they will always do the best possible for them, the best understanding that they have. They search for the truth, and they try to understand the best way to, serve God. But the main thing is, in your heart, do you want to serve God, or you want to just continue as you have been, brought up with, or as you have been, hearing from others, or the way that suits you worldly? So, then if serving God is the most important part of our identity, and is the most important thing that can be shared with us, then we are in a very good position for unity. Because people who share their identity to the maximum, they can have maximum unity. So who share maximum identity, they share maximum unity. If God is our identity 100%, we can have 100% unity. Muslims, Christians, Jews, there is no limit in our unity if we manage to make God 100% of our identity. If we compromise and add to God and put next to God other things, our unity becomes weaker and weaker. Yeah? So some people say, how can, for example, a Sunni and Shia be 100% united, or a Muslim and Christian be 100% united? Some people may say, it's impossible. But I say, it's possible if God is 100% of our identity. In the same way that to be a man or woman, gender doesn't stop unity. Being European or Asian should not stop unity. Even being Muslim or Christian should not stop unity. Being Catholic, Protestant, Shia, Sunni should not stop unity if God makes us what we are. So, because it's only God can unite 100%. Nothing else is able to unite us 100%. So there is no limit in our identity, in our unity, if we have this kind of understanding. And interestingly, when we refer to the Quran, we see that God is calling us to become part of a united nation, not United Nations. United nation. So, if Sister Isra can show Surah Al-Anbiya 21, chapter 2, verses 92 and 93. I quote from 2 chapters, but there are lots of similarities between the two. إن هذه أمتكم أمة واحدة. And this is the end of my talk, so I just finish with these 2 verses. Yes. So, إن هذه أمتكم أمة واحدة. Normally when people talk, they talk about Muslim nation. When they say ummah, means Muslim nation. And this is a usage which we find in some hadiths, etc. But when the Quran is talking here about nation, is not nation of the Prophet. This is monotheistic nation throughout the history. God refers to previous prophets. This is chapter of the prophets. God talks about different prophets, and the very last verse before this is about Lady Mary. And God says, we made Mary and her son a sign for the people of the world. Then God says, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. God says, this nation that at one point was headed by Abraham, then Jacob, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, Jesus, this is one nation. إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ. This is your nation, and it's a united nation, أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. So there is no several similar nations. It's one nation. وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ. One nation, one community, one Lord. فَاعْبُدُونَ. Serve me, become a servant. So if you are a servant of one God and member of one community, so 100% unity. But unfortunately, this didn't happen in the history. وَتَقَطَّعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُم. The next verse says, but they fragmented their affairs or their religion. People didn't get message. God sent prophets, called us towards unity, but then we made a shelter. We made our religion a compartment, separated ourselves from others. We didn't remember that this is not one line. كُلٌّ إِلَيْنَا رَاجِعُونَ. But all them, they will return to God, and God will inform them about their mistakes. The next verse is Surah Al-Mu'minun, verse 52-53. وَإِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. Yes, very similar. The verse before talks to messengers. Again, like the previous one, the context was referring to the prophets. Here, God talks to messengers, and then He says, وَإِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ. Very similar. This is your nation, a united nation, and I am your Lord. فَاتَّقُونَ. In the previous one was فَعْبُدُونَ. Worship me yourself. Is فَاتَّقُونَ means to observe my will. So, we are already united. We just need to recognize our unity. We don't need to build unity. God has made us already united. You know, sometimes you want to force yourself to a family. This doesn't work. You are not born to that family. You cannot force yourself to that family. But sometimes you are born to that family, you just don't know. People tell you, you are a member of this family. We don't need to make unity. God has made us united. Just we need to recognize and see the unity. So then after that, again God says, فَتَقَطَّعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُم. Similar to the previous one in another chapter. God says, but they fragmented their affairs or their religion, and unfortunately, كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. Every party is just happy with what they have. They don't want to become part of the larger unity. They just say, we are fine. We don't want to lose this shelter. They want to be together. So, this was what I thought can be some reflections about identity and unity and the role that God plays in our understanding of our identity, and how in God we can have 100% unity, and that this unity is already there. We need just people to understand, which is not easy because many times humanity has failed. They haven't understood this unity. But we need to find that unity, acknowledge that unity, unless, if we don't do it, other people may in future will do it. But definitely, this world will be finally witnessing this unity. I hope we are part of it. But plan of God is that world will not finish without unity. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. This one.